And yet we live in a world today that teaches that, oh, it doesn't matter. You just, take your way, and then eventually all roads lead to heaven. That's the culture we live in. And so when you share what I am about to share today, you can understand, especially for people who do not know Jesus, why there would be a pushback and why they would almost feel like, what are you saying, that you're better than I am and you know more than I know? And that, you can understand that from a fleshly perspective. And yet, when we look at why people believe that, is because for some of us, we've given them great reason to not believe. They've been following our life and our resume. And they look at us and they say, well, if that's what it means to be a Christian, I'm not sure I want that anyway. And so we need to understand today that there are people who push back, especially young people today, who would say, why would I want what my mom and dad have when they go home, all they do is argue and fight anyway? Why would I want that if that's living, if that's a, quote, relationship with God? But the bottom line here is this, and this is hard. I know this is tough, folks. It's either true or it's false. Either what Jesus said is accurate or it's not. And so you have to decide today, who you're going to believe. For those of us who have already made the decision, we believe John 14:6, and the Bible says he's the way. There's a guy by the name of Dr. Ravi Zacharias. Now I'm going to share his story at the end of the message. Today he's one of the great theologians of our day. And what makes him so unique is that he was raised in India. He was raised around Hinduism, the Muslim faith, Buddhist, and a little bit of Christianity. He was exposed to just about every kind of religion in our world today. But he experienced John 14:6. And so today, if you're here today and you're saying, well, that's not enough for me, then maybe we need to be reminded that today that the world we live in, there's something within all of us that says we're striving for more. We know that religion's not enough. I don't know how many of you saw when Rick Warren was interviewed on Larry King Live. This is the guy that was able to do the inaugurational prayer at President Obama's inauguration. And most of us have been kind of following Rick Warren. He's kind of become like a new spokesman today. But Larry King asked him this question, and he was trying to hit what we're talking about today head on in a roundabout way. He said, well, let me ask you this. Then what you're saying is your religion today has more truth than all the other religions in the world. And he was kind of trying to pin, this preacher. Rick Warren gave a pretty good answer. And maybe it's the answer that some of us need to hear today, at least to the degree that to help us to understand where other people are. And this is what he said. He said, every religion probably has some truth to it. Some truth to it. But wouldn't it be great if you were part of the religion that had all the truth? That might be something you want to think about when you're talking to people who say, well, I'm from a different faith and this is what and they're good, moral people. Maybe every religion has some truth. But wouldn't it be nice if we were part of the truth? The Bible says, I am the way. Mahatma Gandhi, most of us have heard of his name, was a very religious man. He also was, raised in India. If you were looking for a guy and you're trying to say there's more than one way to God than through what we read today, if there was another way, Gandhi would be that guy. He was the kind of guy that felt like that if you were going to protest against the government, you would do it in a nonviolent way. He was the kind of guy that lived a very simple life. He cared for the poor. If you were looking for somebody in our culture, maybe in our world today, and of course he's deceased now, you would say Gandhi was the good guy. He was a good, moral, religious guy, and he was. Somebody asked Gandhi, a question about Christianity. And this is so sad, but probably it's so true. He says, I like your Christ. I just don't like the Christians that go with it. That hurts, doesn't it? He was a philosopher. He was a lawyer. He was a brilliant man. Gandhi lived the kind of life that you would like every person, maybe even every Christian, to live, in the sense of really living out his faith. And yet, he struggled with this thing we're talking about today, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute, about this thing called truth. The point is this: I don't care what you believe today, until you believe John 14:6, you'll never be satisfied in your life. Jesus said, I am the way. Folks, there's so much religious baggage in our world today. I mean, you know, I don't have to tell you a lot of things that are done today around the world, whether it be terrorist attack or whether it be what's happening in Ireland. It's all got a religious flavor to it. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad? It isn't no wonder that people would say today, why would I want religion when all I see around it is hatred and war and murder? And, you know, I mean, and we see it. Christian missionaries are being just sacrificed like animals in third world countries in the name of religion. So you can understand why somebody 25 and under would push back and say, why would I want to be a part of that? And then Jesus comes along and he says, I am the way. Look at the second thing. He said, I am the truth. And boy, this is really an issue today in our culture. Several years ago, I think Rick went with me, and we went to, it's probably been 5-10 years ago. And there was a guy who used to be a former atheist, and he said that, you know, he would never become a Christian. He was a guy that would debate people who were Christians, and then he became a Christian. And he said that the issue for the next generation, and kind of that's where we are right now, he said it would come down to this issue of truth and tolerance. And let's talk about that for a minute, because we are living right now in America where we have the capability to be tolerant for people of a different faith, people of a different ethnic background. We're tolerant when it comes to somebody's music. We're tolerant when it comes to the way people dress. But isn't it incredible today that if there's one thing that we're not tolerant of in America, is for somebody to quote John 14:6. When you quote that verse, tension, people start pushing away because you get very specific about what God says it takes to become a child of the living God. He said, I am the way, I am the truth. Gandhi searched for truth. In fact, Gandhi said this. This is incredible, because at one point in his life, this is what he said. He believed John 14:6. At one point in his life, he said, God is truth. That's what he said. But when he experienced Buddhism and the Muslim faith, and specifically the Hindu faith, he changed that. And then he said, truth is God. Now there's a huge difference. You know what he was saying? Whatever your truth is good enough for God, to have a relationship with God. No absolutes in that kind of truth. And yet Gandhi was the kind of guy that you would want to emulate because he was a good guy. Now I'm going to really push this because I need to try to illustrate how important this is about when Jesus says, I am the way and the truth. Gandhi believed there were a lot of ways to God. When he died, somebody asked him this question before he died. He was assassinated, but they asked him, well, what religion do you belong to? He said, I'm part Hindu, I'm part Muslim, I'm part Christian, I'm part Jew, you just name it, I'm part that. That's what he said. Unfortunately, he was assassinated. Now, let me show you why this is so controversial. You take somebody like Gandhi, who lived his whole life as a good, moral person, and if you were going by that standard, you would say, if there's a way to God, Gandhi found that road, one day he'll be on the front seat, right? But if you come back to John 14:6,